Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Dickey, and I'm an assistant professor at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School in Boston. And I co-direct a porphyria clinic here. We started the clinic a few years ago. Dr. Rebecca Karp in hematology and I started this clinic, and we've seen over 150 patients with confirmed porphyria since we started this clinic. A large proportion of our patients there have erythropoietic protoporphyria, which is one type of porphyria that causes very painful cutaneous light sensitivity. Of the porphyrias are defects of heme synthesis, so problems in the making of heme, which carries oxygen on red blood cells. And each type of porphyria has a problem with a different enzyme or protein in the making of heme. There's 8 different types of porphyria, and EPP is one of those types. In EPP, patients develop very severe pain after light exposure, and that results because of a chemical that builds up in the blood, one of the intermediate steps of heme synthesis. There's a chemical that builds up that's very light sensitive. It actually is very similar to chlorophyll that reacts with the light in plants. So in people with EPP, it reacts with the light and then it spits out damaging substances that damage the skin internally. In EPP, patients generally don't develop blistering or scarring, maybe a little bit, but not very significant. And people generally look very normal, except that it can be very, very painful. In other types of porphyria, there's more blistering and scarring, but it's actually less painful. How I got into this work is that I actually have EPP myself. I started having symptoms age 2 or 3, wasn't diagnosed till I was 13, but having EPP myself has motivated me to work on EPP for my research career, and it's been a very rewarding and meaningful process for me. So for EPP, there's a range of severity. Some people have symptoms almost immediately after going out in the light, developing very severe pain. Some people are very sensitive to even indoor lights. In EPP, we're not actually sensitive to UV light, so sunscreen doesn't help at all. And some people are less sensitive, can be outside for an hour or more. And in general, for EPP, if you're in the sun a lot one day, then your light sensitivity worsens the next day. And really, to deal with it, patients just have to avoid light, either be inside or wear light protective clothing. And the most sensitive areas are the face and the hands and the feet. And so wearing light protective clothing over your face in public isn't very well received, causes a lot of issues with going to work, interacting with family and friends. And when people with EPP develop these painful episodes, it lasts a long time. A lot of times it can last at least a week, and people have to just stay inside in the dark and wait for it to go away. There's currently no medicines that treat EPP reactions once they start. You just have to wait in a dark room for the pain to go away. Even opioids or other things like that haven't been shown to be effective for EPP related pain. So there's a big unmet need in that area because of how painful it is and how long it lasts. Most EPP patients tend to overprotect more than might otherwise be necessary because they can't afford to lose a week or several days for EPP reaction. They have to go to work and do other things. So because of the difficulty in predicting and preventing symptoms, people have to make a lot of adjustments in their lives to avoid the sun. So, because of the difficulty of predicting and preventing symptoms in EPP, I wanted to develop a way for EPP patients to be able to reliably predict and prevent symptoms, which would increase quality of life. And if there was some way for people to know when they might have symptoms, they could be outdoors longer with less anxiety if there was some way to predict it. So I worked with a company called Wearify that has a light dosimeter. So a light dosimeter is a device that measures light dose over time. And our device was designed as a watch with light monitor parts in the watch that could measure the intensity of light in the UV, blue, and red wavelength ranges. And the device measures these wavelength intensities over time and then can send the data to researchers. At the same time, we've had patients respond to text message surveys every day about their light exposure, their symptoms, light protective clothing. Patients in the study would get a text message on their own phone, click on a link, and then answer a few questions about symptoms and light exposure. And then using those together, we're able to develop algorithms, figure out how much light is needed for symptoms for individual patients. The initial study that was published just looked at 5 patients. It was just a very small study. We're doing further studies on the device with more patients to develop better algorithms. This device has a couple of pretty important uses. One is, as I mentioned, to predict and prevent symptoms in EPP. But another is also for better clinical trial endpoints. In EPP, it's been really hard to get new medications approved because the clinical trials have just asked people to report time outdoors without any information about how intense the light is, or seasonality or any other things. An EPP, very bright July day is very different than a cloudy day or a rainy day, and there's not information about that in the clinical trials. So if we can get better data for clinical trials using a light dosimeter, that could also bring effective therapies to patients. So the device that was published recently it's being used as exploratory endpoints in 2 different clinical trials now. One, it was used in a clinical trial of bitopertin for EPP and another of cimetidine for EPP. And for the cimetidine trial, at least our group has the data of the light dose and symptom data, and we're trying to build machine learning models so that we can develop a device that actually gives warnings to patients to predict and prevent symptoms. So far, the data that we have already, patients are blinded to their own data because we wanted that to not affect patients' reporting of symptoms, and so we could develop appropriate algorithms. But in the future, we plan to do studies where we can have patients see their own data and give warnings and see if that will help prevent and predict symptoms. So some of those things are next steps in further developing this technology for EPP. Site at Mass General Hospital, we are a satellite site of the Porphyrias Consortium. It's a consortium in the US of several different sites studying porphyria. And this study is one of the studies of the Porphyrias Consortium, providing some support for the study infrastructure. I also have the new studies that I'm doing on light dosimetry and EPP. I also have some FDA funding from related to the clinical trial that I'm doing. So the Office of Orphan Products Development, and also NIH Institutes is funding the Porphyrias Consortium. So have a lot of different groups supporting these studies. And the Porphyrias Consortium is one of the consortiums of the RDCRN, the Rare Disease Clinical Research Network.